You're standing in the snow. It's 30,000 BC. The wind cuts straight through you, and there is no coat to stop it. There is no fire yet either. Just you, bare skin, and a cold that could kill you before morning. Your breath fogs in the air. Your fingers are already going numb at the tips. And somehow, against every odd, your ancestors did this for hundreds of thousands of years and lived. No down jackets, no wool sweaters, no heater humming in the wall. Just a body, a brain, and whatever they could pull off a dead animal. So how did they not simply freeze to death out here? That is the question. And the answer is far stranger than you would ever guess. Here's the thing that should genuinely bother you. Cold does not negotiate. Drop a naked modern human into a real ice. Age winter, and they are in serious trouble within hours. Hypothermia sets in fast. Your body starts shutting down the edges first, sacrificing your fingers, toes, and ears to protect the warm core. Think about that for a second. We are tropical animals. We evolved in the warmth of Africa under a generous sun. Our bare skin is basically useless against real cold. A wolf has a thick coat of fur. A bear has fat and fur both. A seal is wrapped in blubber. And us? We show up to a frozen planet practically naked, wearing skin built for the savanna. By every rule of survival on paper, we should have quietly died out, but we didn't. We walked straight into the coldest places on the entire Earth, and we stayed there. Why and how? It's not one thing. It's never one thing. Surviving the cold with no clothes was never a single clever trick. It was a whole stack of them, piled one on top of another. Fire, shelter, fat and grease, your own genuinely weird biology, and a handful of tools so simple you would walk right past them in a museum. Peel these layers back one at a time, and by the very end you will see something that almost nobody expects, the real reason humans ever started sewing in the first place. Let's go. Here's what nobody tells you about surviving the cold. The very first thing that saved you was not clothing at all. It was fire. Long before anyone stitched together a single coat, humans were huddling close around open flames. And they took that fire everywhere they went. The Yaghan people of Tierra del Fuego, the frozen and storm-battered tip of South America, carried fire in their canoes. Actual burning fires floating on the water in one of the coldest and wettest places a human being can live. When Charles Darwin sailed past them in the 1830s, he could see the fires glowing from the dark shoreline. He described a land of fire, and Tierra del Fuego literally means exactly that. Fire was never a luxury here. It was the wall standing between you and death. And the second wall was shelter, a cave, a rock overhang, a crude pile of branches. Anything at all that could block the wind, because wind is the true killer out here. It strips the heat off your skin far faster than still, quiet cold ever could. So you found a hole in the rock, you lit a fire at the mouth of it, and you pressed your bare back against the warm stone. It was not comfortable, but it kept you alive until sunrise. And here is why fire mattered so much more than it seems. Making a fire from scratch, out in the cold and the wet, is genuinely hard. Your kindling is damp, your fingers are stiff and clumsy. A single spark can die in an instant, so a living fire was treasure, and you guarded it with everything you had. Groups carried glowing embers with them from camp to camp, nursing that ember for days, so they would never have to start over from nothing. Letting the fire go out could be a death sentence for the whole group. That is why the Yaghan kept those flames burning, even inside their fragile canoes, out on freezing open water. A fire was not just heat. It was cooked food, it was dry hides, it was light in the long dark. And it was the single most important thing you owned. Lose it, and the cold came straight back in for you. Now here is where the story gets interesting. When we casually say ancient humans had no clothes, we do not quite mean fully naked. We mean no clothes like the ones you own, no woven fabric, no tailored fitted coat. What they actually had was simpler and honestly grosser, and it worked anyway. They had animal skin, and they had fat. Those same Yaghan people, living nearly bare in near-freezing rain, smeared their entire bodies in thick seal grease and animal fat. A heavy layer of oil painted directly onto the skin like a second hide. It sounds absolutely disgusting. It is also quietly brilliant. Fat is a natural insulator. It slows the heat leaking out of your body, and it repels water, So the endless cold rain rolls off you instead of soaking in and stealing your warmth. On top of the grease, they draped raw animal hides, a single skin thrown over the shoulders like a rough cape. And that, honestly, is the true starting point of all clothing. Not a soft shirt, a greasy hide and a fistful of rendered fat. Keep that in mind the next time you complain your jacket isn't warm enough. But here's the part that is actually inside you at this very moment. Your body carries its own built-in heating system, and it switches on automatically the second you get cold. The first move is shivering. Those fast little muscle twitches are not random panic. They burn energy specifically to generate heat. It is your body cranking the furnace up by hand. Then there is something quieter and much stranger called brown fat. Most of the fat on your body simply stores energy for later. But brown fat does something completely different. It burns fuel purely to produce warmth, with no shivering required at all. Scientists call this non-shivering thermogenesis, which is really just a fancy way of saying your body makes heat on demand. And here is the wild part. The more time you spend out in the cold, the more brown fat your body actually builds. Cold-adapted people carried much more of it. Their bodies literally retooled themselves into better, more efficient heaters over time. The Yaghan, studied closely by modern researchers, show exactly this. Kind of internal adaptation, an engine tuned tight for the freeze. And when your own furnace still wasn't enough, you simply borrowed heat from others. You huddled together. A tight pile of warm bodies loses far less heat than one person shivering alone. You squatted low to the ground, pulled your limbs in close, and folded yourself into a tight little ball to shrink the surface the cold could reach. Small tricks, every one of them. But stacked together, they made an enormous difference. But here's the catch that nobody warns you about. All of that internal heat has to be paid for. Your body is a furnace, and a furnace needs fuel to burn. Staying warm in real cold burns an astonishing number of calories, far more than you would ever guess. Just sitting still and shivering can quietly torch through your energy reserves. So surviving the cold was never only a warmth problem. It was also, secretly, a food problem. And in the frozen dead of winter, food is exactly what vanishes. The plants are gone. The berries are gone. The easy gathering is over. So ancient humans leaned hard on the one thing that packs the most energy per bite: fatty meat. Fat carries more than twice the calories of anything else you can eat. A hunter who brought back a fat-rich animal wasn't just bringing dinner. He was bringing raw fuel for every single furnace in the group. This is why cold climate peoples the world over prized fat so highly. Hunting seals, reindeer, and other rich animals. You were quite literally eating warmth. Every greasy, fatty mouthful was another log thrown onto the fire burning inside you. Skip too many meals in that cold, and your internal heater simply ran out of fuel and went dark. And here is a trick that costs nothing at all: timing. Ancient humans did not fight the winter head-on like fools. They worked around it. In the brutal cold months, life slowed way down. You did not go marching out into a blizzard for no reason. You stayed close to the fire and the shelter, and you saved your precious energy. The big, exhausting jobs, the long hunts and the travel, waited for the milder stretches. And when the cold pressed in hardest, people simply moved to escape it, following the herds and the warmth, drifting toward sheltered valleys and away from the killing wind. Even the daily rhythm changed. You did the fiddly indoor work, mending hides and shaping. Tools tucked safely beside the flames while the storm howled outside. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but choosing when to move and when to stay perfectly still was its own quiet kind of survival. The smartest thing you could do against the cold was often to simply refuse to fight it. Now zoom the camera all the way out over thousands of years, and something even deeper starts to happen. The bodies themselves begin to change. There is an old rule in biology. In cold climates, bodies tend to get shorter, wider, and stockier over generations. Why does that happen? Because a compact body holds its heat far better. A tall, long-limbed frame has enormous surface area for precious heat to escape from. A short, barrel-chested one keeps that warmth locked deep inside. And the single best example ever built by evolution was the Neanderthal. Our cold climate cousins were stocky, powerful, and barrel-chested, with notably short arms and short legs, almost as if the Ice Age itself had designed them to trap warmth. They were, in a strange sense, living radiators running in. Reverse, leaking far less heat than our lanky bodies do. And that mattered enormously, because Neanderthals lived through brutal European winters that would make your very worst cold snap feel like a mild spring afternoon. They did not need a fancy, elaborate wardrobe to manage it. Their own bodies were quietly doing a huge share of the work. It is far too easy to picture every ancient human as helpless and shivering in the snow. But some of them were built for the cold from the inside out. Okay, but a raw animal skin on its own is not clothing. Pull a fresh hide off a dead deer and just leave it lying there. And within a few short days, it turns stiff as a board. Then it starts to rot. Then it is completely useless to you. So here's the real problem ancient humans had to crack. How do you turn a bloody floppy skin into something you can actually wear day after day for years? The answer is a tiny, deeply unglamorous tool called a hide scraper. It's just a sharpened piece of stone held tight in the hand, used to scrape every last scrap of fat and flesh off. The inside of the skin, hours upon hours of patient, aching scraping. Then the cleaned hide was stretched out, dried carefully, and worked soft by hand, sometimes even treated with natural tanning agents to stop it from ever rotting. This is the invisible, forgotten labor of the entire Ice Age, not the dramatic hunting, the quiet processing. Neanderthals were doing precisely this with stone scrapers and simple bone tools long before anyone anywhere had invented a needle. And to actually join two pieces of hide together, they used an awl. It's basically a sharp bone spike used to punch a row of holes. So thin strips of skin could be threaded through them and tied off tight. No needle required whatsoever. With nothing but scrapers and awls, you could already make a poncho, a wrap, a rough but real set of body coverings. Simple, yes, but it was more than enough to survive another winter. And then came the upgrade that quietly changed absolutely everything, the eyed needle. Here is the crucial difference. An awl only punches a hole and stops there, but a needle, with a tiny eye at one end, to carry the thread along with it, lets you truly sew. Tight, fine, continuous stitches, one after another, and that single ability means fitted clothing. Not just a loose skin draped over you and clutched shut, but real sleeves, stacked layers, and sealed seams. Clothing shaped closely to your actual body, sealed tight against the biting wind. The oldest known eyed needle on Earth comes from Denisova Cave, deep in Siberia, and it is roughly 50,000 years old. It measures about 7 centimeters long, carefully carved from a hollow bird bone, with a neat little hole drilled straight through the top to hold the thread. And here is the incredible part. It is so well made that it would very likely still work perfectly today. It wasn't even made by our own species. It was crafted by the Denisovans, a mysterious cousin branch of the wider human family tree. With a proper needle like that in hand, you could finally build a real cold weather outfit. Trapped warm air held between snug layers, a tight, sealed fit. Seams that genuinely shut the freezing wind out. This is the exact moment clothing stops being a cape you desperately clutch closed, and quietly becomes something very close to a real coat. And you would naturally assume it was invented for one single, obvious reason: to survive the cold. That is the exact part that almost everyone gets completely wrong. Now let's be honest about that phrase, no clothes, because it is a little bit of a trick. Humans have actually worn some form of clothing for a genuinely long time. And scientists worked this out in one of the cleverest ways imaginable, by carefully studying lice. There is a specific kind of louse that only ever lives in clothing, never in hair. It literally cannot exist at all without clothes to cling onto. So a team at the University of Florida traced its DNA backwards to find out exactly when it first split off from ordinary head lice. The answer, published back in 2011, was roughly 170,000 years ago. That is the precise moment clothing became common enough among humans to grow its very own dedicated species of parasite. So truly surviving a deep, killing winter with absolutely zero covering, that was rare and brutal and usually only possible, with fire, fat, and shelter all stacked tightly together. The so-called naked humans, like the Yaghan, were never actually naked at all. They were greased head to toe, huddled close, and ringed by fire. The cold almost always won in the end, unless you found a way to cheat it. So here is the very last thing, and it is, The part that flips this entire story on its head. We just said the needle let humans make fitted, warm, sealed clothing, which naturally makes you assume the needle was invented to fight off the cold. But look a little closer, and the timeline simply does not fit. Humans already had warm, tailored clothing well before the eyed needle ever showed up. Bulls and scrapers had been quietly making fitted skins for thousands of years already. So if people could already stay perfectly warm, then why on earth bother inventing the needle at all? A study led by Dr. Ian Gilligan, published in 2024, asked exactly that question, and the answer is honestly beautiful. The eyed needle was never really about warmth in the first place. It was about decoration. Around 40,000 years ago, humans suddenly started sewing beads, pierced shells, and tiny ornaments directly onto their clothing. And to do that kind of fine, delicate, intricate work, you absolutely need a needle. A clumsy awl is far too crude for it, and here is the deeper logic underneath it all. Before we wore clothing, people decorated their own bare skin with paint, with marks, with ornaments hung on the body. But once the deep, killing cold forced you to cover your whole body in hides, all that bare skin simply vanished from view, so the decoration had nowhere to go but move. It jumped straight off your skin and onto your clothes instead. As the researchers themselves put it, clothing shifted from pure protection into a form of self-expression. Read that line again slowly. The needle was not invented so that we could survive. It was invented so that we could look good. The very first tailored clothes on Earth weren't only armor against the cold, they were also the first real outfits. So think about where all of this quietly leaves you. You are standing there in the snow at the very start of this story, bare and freezing and afraid. And every single thing that saved your ancestors is still right here with you now. The fire they carried in their canoes is the heater humming in your wall. The grease in the hides slowly became the jacket hanging on your back. The brown fat is still burning away quietly inside your chest at this very moment. And that little scrap of bone with a hole drilled in it, that first fragile needle, is the entire reason you own a wardrobe at all. And the reason you quietly care what is in it. Ancient humans did not just barely survive the cold with no clothes. They invented clothing itself, and then, almost immediately, they made it beautiful. So the next time you pull on your favorite coat, just remember, you are wearing 50,000 years of staying alive. And quietly, a little bit of showing off.